welcome to the Researcher Revealed podcast. Can you believe it? It's been a year already. Time flies by. I wanted to kick off season 2 with a really special episode, and after doing a lot of thinking about it and looking back at my notes from all of the previous guests, the themes of mentorship and coaching came up loads across previous episodes. And so I thought it'd be a really interesting idea to reach out to somebody who is a professional coach and get them on to ask them about what they believe the power of coaching could do for a researcher, especially a non-medic researcher, as they're embarking on their career. So thanks to a previous guest, you know who you are, I reached out to somebody who not only is a professional coach, but actually has started to develop a specific niche around coaching clinical academics. So I asked Mr. GaryReed to join me on today's episode. I hope that you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the next episode on Researcher Revealed. This is the podcast where we go behind just the name that's on a paper or a conference proceeding in order to find out why people do research. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, and I'll get into why he's so special in a little bit. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Gary. Gary, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi, so I'm GaryReed. I'm a leadership coach. I primarily work with people in higher education, but I have a particular niche in clinical academics.
Very exciting. So, as you've probably guessed from his introduction there, the reason why we've had him on is this is the beginning of the second season of the podcast. And during the first season, a repeating theme that kept coming up was around mentorship, coaching, those sorts of things in reference to being a researcher as a non-medic. And one of my guests, who shall remain nameless, suggested I reach out to GaryReed and have him come on the podcast to talk about coaching. So that's why we're doing this very special episode to kick off season 2 on the Researcher Revealed. But the interesting thing about Gary is that aside from being a coach, specifically his niche around clinical academics, which we'll get to in a bit, he also has a background in research. But first and foremost, before I forget, because I'm so excited about today's episode, I nearly just went straight into asking you questions. We must still do the Rapid 11.
Oh, please, I'm looking forward to this.
Are you ready for the Rapid 11, Gary?
I'm ready.
Right. Are you a Windows or Mac user?
Mac user.
Ooh, nice. Coffee or tea?
If I had to pick tea, but I like both.
Oh, yes. Tea for the win. I'm trying to get more tea drinkers on so that we can overtake the coffee drinkers, because
Coffee makes me go a bit bonkers. So
it is. But you know what I found really interesting is in Sweden, as well as in Korea, they have a much bigger tea drinking culture, and it was so nice to go to a cafe and actually have like a tea menu rather than like, here's your builder's tea and it's crap because it was made by somebody who doesn't know how to make tea. So hopefully we're leading a tea revolution.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah.
When you are writing, do you prefer, or doing like heavy thinking, processing, stuff like that, do you prefer to have silence, or do you like listening to music or sounds?
I prefer music, actually, just quietly in the background, a bit of classical music, just keep the beat.
Nice, very nice. What time of day would you say you're most productive?
Oh, I'm like 50% of the population, so I'm between like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Okay. It's an interesting one. What is your, you probably can't answer this one actually. Do you ever use referencing management systems?
Not anymore, but I used to use EndNote.
One for the EndNote. It is by far the most popular. And what about, again, now that you're more of a coach, I don't know whether or not you use this or not, any sort of data visualization tools, or like creating figures or diagrams or things like that. Is that something that you do within coaching or not so much anymore?
Not so much in coaching, but some of the leadership courses I do. But quite often I cheat and I just get a designer to do it for me.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait till I'm
Well,
that
you
cool
think
to
it
cheat.
looks better, it looks more professional. So.
That's like a goal for me is to be able to get to the level where I'm allowed to cheat. Slash have the money to cheat.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like that. I like that. What about when you're sitting at your desk whiling away working? Do you have a favorite snack?
Oh yeah, I tend not to have breakfast, but so late morning, I really enjoy some wholemeal toast with like whole peanut butter and a bit of jam on top. I've only discovered the joys of it recently because I know, in American films they always go, peanut butter and jello, and I thought, what's that about? Well, there you go.
Yeah, PB&J. It's a PB&J coming from
Yeah.
Canada. I grew up on PB&J. Oh, very cool. When you're planning and organizing, so whether that's your day, your life, your any sort of like side projects you might be working on, so like leadership courses and stuff, are you a digital planner or are you a pen and paper planner?
Yes, digital, but it's normally because if I'm doing a course or something, I just open a Word document and just start developing it. So, just why write and then type? That's my
Fair enough.
thinking.
Fair enough. There's no criticism here. It's pure curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm finding it really fascinating. Like I do this for every guest, and I'm sort of in the background compiling data, and like odd things are coming up. So, for example, most popular desk snack, banana.
Ah,
Who
they go
knew?
off. They go rotten too quickly.
Fair enough. Right, two more questions. What is the book that you are currently reading?
Oh, right. So for fiction, I'm
Hmm.
reading, oh, crikey, The Wolf. What's it called? Elizabeth Chadwick, the Wild Hunt. So it's an 11th century book based on the Welsh marches, and yeah,
What's
so I
it
like
called again?
the Wild Hunt.
The
Yeah,
Wild
so
Hunt.
yeah, so I like sort of historical fiction. That's my escapism. And then for professional, I've normally got one on the go, and I've got sort of coaching what really works. It sounds like I'm a beginner, doesn't it? But it's by Jenny Rogers. I saw her at a conference last year, and I thought, oh, she's good. I like her, so I'm reading her book.
All right, I'm just writing those down so that I can add them to my list. J. Rogers. Especially the historical fiction one, because that's my escapism of choice as well.
Mm,
Love historical fiction.
yeah,
I've recently, because I'm in Norway, I've been trying to read like Norwegian historical fiction, and some of their books around like the witch trials that happened in northern Norway. Oh, vale, scary.
scary stuff. Yeah.
But really interesting at the same time. So I just finished reading one called The Witches of Narbo. And the interesting thing of it is the person who wrote it did loads of research around it and actually used transcripts, journals, letters around the witch trials to put it together. And she used some of the people's real names, but changed their stories a little bit.
Mm,
And for me, reading that book, the take home story was in that day and time, what made you a witch was if you were better than a man and you threatened his authority. It
yeah,
didn't even actually have anything to do with alleged magic. Like sometimes in North America, a lot of them were, like women who were healers who understood like the medicine of natural herbs and poultices and things like that. This, it was just like almost you could, if you were looking at it with today's lens, you could certify the accusing male horde or mob as
yeah,
basically being certifiably mentally unstable because they were accusing women like they were locked up in a cell with no physical way of escaping, and they allegedly transformed themselves into animals, dug their way out, and then because why wouldn't you? went off to a local person's basement and drank all their beer and had a great time. And then, because they're stupid, then dug themselves back into the prison in which they were being held.
Hmm. How bizarre. Can't
Yeah,
explain
it's
that
really,
one.
you should put it on your list. It's
Well,
such a
yeah,
good
I will
book.
definitely. No, it sounds really interesting. Yeah, and it just, as you said, I think it's just scary, isn't it? Any difference? It's still alive today, isn't it? Not witch
Yeah,
trials, obviously, but difference is
yeah,
just really unaccepted by some people. So yeah.
yeah, definitely. Anyway, back on track. Oh dear. So you are now a coach, specializing in both leadership with a niche sort of subgroup around clinical academics. But one of the things that I found really interesting when you sent me your bio and when I was chatting to you about coming on the podcast, you mentioned that you had been previously involved in research. So I was wondering if you'd just be happy to quickly share with us your pathway, how you got into research, why research, and then connect up to where we are today.
Yeah, sure. So it's an interesting one because I think I described my career as eclectic and I scrubbed it out and said portfolio. As a coach, that's what I would tell someone with my sort of career. When I left university, I started working for a company called Ericsson in the days before they had mobile phones, ages a
Okay.
little bit. And I was a salesperson for them, and I despised every moment of my existence there. But I survived in that area for about 7 years or six
Okay.
years.
Wow.
And I thought there had to be more to life than this because it wasn't challenging me sort of mentally. So I went back to university, became a school teacher, realized that actually I don't really like children very much. But luckily, part of my teaching practice was in the further education college. And so I
Okay.
became a lecturer there, which was teaching mainly adults or 16 years up. And then from there, there's a stepping stone then to Loughborough University, where I became a researcher. And I ended up being a researcher, particularly around consumer behavior, but
Okay.
in car dealerships of all things. I was sponsored by Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
So yeah, so it was, and I was there for about 10 years, and I sort of progressed from researcher to lecturer, and then I became director of research for our Centre for Automotive Management. Um, but I've got to say, for me, what I could do research and the bits I loved about it was the design and the collection of data and number crunching and so forth. Writing papers, not my bag, but I used to work with people who were better at that than me or enjoyed doing it. But I thought I didn't feel like I was really making a difference in the world, making someone's car buying experience better. It wasn't pressing my buttons. And so after 10 years, I went, there was an opportunity to move back to Wales, which is where I'm from, West Wales.
Okay.
And so I worked on a strategic alliance between Aberystwyth and Bangor University. So I was sort of then applying, I said as consumer behavior, but I was sort of marketing management. That was my discipline. So I was applying those skills to that role. And that evolved over time into sort of more permanent role at Aberystwyth University, where I set up a research support office and then merged it with a research enterprise office, delivered REF 2014. And after that, I did the merger and everything. I realized I quite like change. And
Okay.
it was, yeah, I got a bit bored because everything was working smoothly. There was nothing to get my teeth into. And I
Right.
was thinking about what bits have I enjoyed the most about the last few
Mm.
years? And it wasn't being a director or the leadership stuff itself. It was developing people in my team and supporting them. And so I evolved back into that sector by going to work for Leadership Foundation, which is was a higher education sort of organization pushing leadership, I suppose, or developing leadership, which merged into what is now Advance HE, as some people in the UK would probably recognise. So I was working for them and liaising with all their Welsh universities and also delivering leadership courses. And on
Okay.
that, there was a point where um, you could they needed people to coach people at the end of a course because at the end of a course you
Okay.
sometimes go off a cliff
Yeah.
So coaching keeps them back in it. And that's when I thought, I'm
Okay.
going to become a coach then. And so that's why I trained in 2018. That's when I did my training, and I've been doing it ever since.
Okay. So you did loads of research, but it was more like consumer behavior, automotive. So I'm absolutely, and then you developed into a coach, and there was something in what led you to being a coach that I'm going to put a pin in and I want to come back to. But first, just to connect the dots, how did you go from being a leadership coach? And like I can see how like understanding the structure of research and consumer behavior and stuff like that would help. But how did you get connected to health researchers, specifically clinical academics?
Okay. Well, I guess part of it is that to be a coach, traditionally, people would say on a course, you can coach anyone in anything. You don't have to know anything about their
Okay.
subject area. For me, because of my background, I do have some understanding, and I was a senior academic leader as well. So I bring that sort of insight and knowledge. And my coaches have always said, "Oh, it's great working with you because we speed things up at the beginning as you get everything and you get the culture and so forth." How I ended up in the clinical academic space was a good friend of mine who's a clinical academic, put me on to someone who was applying for an NIHR grant, who was needing some
Ah,
confidence. And so we connected, and I supported them. And then from that, um, they recommended me to people, and it snowballed from that, really. And I've got to say, out of I like everyone who I coach, but I particularly like this community because they're at that sort of cusp often of moving into the leadership space. And it's they've got the vibrancy and the energy and the growth mindset. And because they're researchers, they're curious. So I absolutely, they're my favorite client group, I'd have to say. I won't be
that
sharing the link to this video to any of my other clients, obviously.
it'll be top secret. Nobody watches this anyway. It'll be fine. They'll never find out that you've got a favorite that isn't them. Oh, I love it. Oh, that's really fascinating. It's just there's yeah, the power of a network and that previous experience that you'd kind of put on a shelf and is like, it's not for me, actually giving you like you said, like a fast track, but also to the language that client is speaking. But I think also you even though it's in a different speciality, because you've walked that walk, I would imagine if I were to be a client of yours, that comes with a bit of gravitas to it because I know that you understand it. I know you understand, and it's more than just being able to speak the lingo or mirroring the language. You've got that authority behind you too of having walked that walk. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that. I like the way you described that. Just to sort of add to it, it's interesting when I contract with each of my clients, I describe my coaching as it's all coaching based in that sort of curiosity space. But because of my background, I think my mind says to me it would not be in service of the client if I didn't bring mentoring or experience in to share with them where appropriate. And that's what a few of my clients have said to me. Said that's what the difference is for them between me and perhaps a previous coach they've had, where the joke with a coach is you ask a coach a question, they'll ask you another question. You ask a mentor a question, they give you the answer. So it's not, I try not to give an answer. I'll give an example or a scenario and get them to apply it to themselves, but it's a little different. So mm.
no, I have a confession to make. Yeah, it's terrible. So in my pathway so far, um, I have been on coaching courses and I have had individuals who have, I doubt they've had the same degree of experience and development in coaching as you have. But it's in the NHS a very common thing that higher ups are trying to get managers to use. And It sets my teeth on edge. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here because there are so many times where I'm going to that person in a senior position where I know they know the answer. I have no desire of being coached. I just need a solution to my problem. And to be coached through that can sometimes, for me anyway, really like set my teeth on edge because I feel like it's not necessarily always used the way it's designed to be used.
Yeah, no, I get you, and it's often, I do train people in sort of a leader as coach, and it's about using a coaching style in your leadership approach, but it's about the right time and place. And it's funny because I have, you as a coach, you have supervision, but you also have peer coaches as well. Sometimes you chat to a peer coach and you end up talking to them, and then they start coaching. You go, I don't want to be coached right now. I just want your opinion. so stop
I've
coaching
actually
me.
said that.
So,
Oh,
but again, so when I'm coaching clients, I always say at the beginning, what do you want from me as your coach today? And maybe I just want to talk it through, or I just like your thoughts, or just I want to think about some of the limiting beliefs that are behind this behavior. So yeah, but I always base it in coaching. It's not, it doesn't go beyond, it doesn't it always comes from a point of curiosity as opposed to, oh, I know the answer, here you go, I'll give it to you.
I like that. Right, I'm going to return now to the thing I put a pin in and wrote down on my book is not just in clinical academics, but in a lot of papers that describe individuals who like especially within health, and for me being a nurse, especially within nursing, how very few people actually go on and do PhD or research training, and then of that percentage who do that, the amount who actually use that skill is minuscule. Like, I think I went to a talk, like this stat might be old, but I went to a chat nationally where the NIHR had set a goal of having 1% of researchers being a nurse, and like the current level being something like 0.1.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but that there's this, I think it was between, again, I didn't look at the numbers before we started this, but it was between 70 and 85% of doctorally trained nurses fall off a cliff. And when you were describing why you coach and why you get into it, you spoke about how you yourself have recognized outside of clinical academic, when somebody comes to the end of a course, there's a cliff.
Mm.
So my question to you is, how do you see coaching as potentially building a bridge at that cliff instead of people jumping off of it and hoping to evolve wings, which is kind of what a lot of us are doing at the minute.
Yeah. The analogy I've always used for this is, you take someone, from sort of say working in the clinical environment, you take them out of there, put them into a course, and it's a bit like taking a goldfish out of a dirty goldfish bowl and putting it in a clean tank, for 3-4 days or whatever it is. And
Okay.
then but in that clean tank, they're having a nice time, you're training them, but then you put them back in the dirty goldfish bowl water. And so the consequence, all the ideas and initiatives and learning that's gone on there gets lost because you're back onto the quagmire of everyday work. Where coaching comes in is it sort of enables people to step back out of that again and reconnect with the learning from, especially if they're not using perhaps some of the research skills in the day to day. And I think, one of the things I do really focus on with all my coachees is how working out what your passion is. For some people, it may be the clinical side, that's it. But for others, it's like, well, what is your passion? How are you going to move? What needle are you trying to move? What difference do you want to make in the world? What legacy do you want to leave behind? And once people can find that, then they can work out, well, what's the route to getting that? So for some people, it's, half-time clinician, half-time researcher. For others, it's mostly research and a little bit of clinical, or vice versa. But yeah, so I think it's about reconnecting people with that, as opposed, and in a funny way, I talk about this, finding your purpose. It's sort of a privileged position to be in when you have the space to find your purpose. If you're just dealing with the day-to-day 9 to 5, getting your salary and feeding the kids, sometimes it can be difficult to get out of that. So you just need someone to sort of hold your hand and help you find it.
I love that. The privilege of finding your purpose. That's so powerful.
Oh, thank
Because
you.
I think, like you say, like when you finish, depending on the university, depending on the mentors who are around you, there's a degree in which you may or may not have identified that purpose as a clinical academic, and that it varies on the individual location and supervision. But I think, it makes me think whether or not some of the cliff fallers, rather than the cliff flyers, are because of that exact reason, in that they they went away, like you say, into this clean tank, and we're in a really happy, really supportive environment, and they enjoyed their time, and they learned, and they did things, and maybe they were working towards something that they thought they wanted, but they've changed along the way, or that opportunity isn't available to them, or whatever the circumstances would be. And so they go back to the tank, and now they are just, especially in a clinical environment, and especially currently, there's such a high demand for clinical skills. Like, you just get hoovered up,
Yeah,
and you lose the privilege of taking time to find your purpose, because you've got a wait list of 200 patients who need your specialist skills.
mm,
You've got a manager who is saying you've got to do even more. You've got colleagues who may or may not be able to help you because they don't, all of those complications that the NHS is facing right now. So I really like that it is a privilege. It's not a
yeah.
guarantee that when you get to the cliff, you get to fly.
No, and I think that some people I coach are in hospitals that don't have a direct university connection. So then they're battling against, how do they, they may have an NIHR fellowship, but they're not understood. So a lot of the coaching is about, how do you promote yourself and and help people to understand the impact and the value of what you're doing.
So it can be, so coaching then, the more I'm listening to you talk, is a real tool that an emerging leader as a researcher should access, because it can really help you through using some of those skills that you gained in research, with your curiosity and somebody to supervise you, to use like a PhD word,
Yeah.
to guide you on this journey of figuring out where are your barriers, where is your passion, and come up with a plan to navigate that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You talked about the leadership tree model, but if I have to sort of squash leadership, or even what we're talking about now, into 3 words, the 3 C's, as I think about it, it'd be curiosity. So using curiosity to explore and find out and understand other people's perspectives and so forth. But that drives the clarity. So then you've got clarity. And then if you're just thinking about it from a leadership perspective, it makes communication so much easier, and also decision making. But curiosity, clarity, and communication it's when I'm coaching people, quite a lot will talk about situations, scenarios, and they go, "I've just heard you using curiosity, clarity, and communication." They go, "Yeah." Yeah.
Brilliant. I love it. So that's, it's really, I think for me, like if we go back to, like, 20 minutes ago when we started talking about this, and my dirty confession that I hate coaching, because it really does annoy me at times, is you're starting to change my mind a little bit about it, because I think, if it's used appropriately in the right time with the right situation, because that's exactly like your three C's: your curiosity, clarity, and communication. That's your research triangle. So that framework makes sense to my researcher brain,
Yeah,
because you're curious about something. So then you seek clarity in it, in either doing a literature review, collecting some data, blah, blah, blah. You analyze it, you make sense of it, and then you communicate it to the world. So like
exactly. So it's just a lot of what comes up is a lot of people learn, for example, in interviews, always pause before giving an answer. And I'd say to people, well, just take that into your job, into your leadership role. Just pause a little more. Oh, yeah, I can do that then. So
Yeah.
but it's for each client, it's always different. And I'm very much, I have a sort of a structure of a session, but I'm very much an emergent coach. So I respond to whatever the client is bringing and what they
Okay.
need. And for
Okay.
some people, that could be about confidence. For others, it's they've got a sort of tangled situation they're trying to navigate. So we explore that. So there's no one size fits all. And I think maybe what you're experiencing is someone's asking you a load of questions using a model like a grow model or something. Yeah, which is
It's not necessarily a bad thing. And
no,
I think it was initiated, especially in clinical situations, with the right idea of trying to take pressure off of managers by encouraging them to get people who are not necessarily thinkers and doers of themselves to start to think and do independently. But again, I think it's that lack of, I know how to do that, and I wouldn't have come, like, it's that
mm,
understanding of why that person's approaching you
yeah.
that
And
has
I
been
get
missing in some of my experiences.
and I guess if I was coaching you and you're describing that situation, I'd say just flag up to them what you want from them. So I've got this problem. What I need from you is.
Yeah, exactly. Which I'm getting better at. I'm getting better at. And
Good,
I'm also
good.
getting better at standing up and being like, I don't want to be coached.
Brilliant.
Um, right. I'm just watching the clock go tick, tick, tick. You mentioned it there perfectly, which is a great segue, is that on your website, I had a little bit of an explore, and you have this very beautiful, and for everybody who's listening or watching out there, in the episode description, I'll put the link in so that you can see it as well. But this absolutely beautifully drawn out leadership tree. Now, from your Rapid 11, I'm guessing somebody else drew that for you, which is not a criticism at all.
I drew it myself, and it looked like a 7-year-old's tree with loads of words. And I gave it to a professional, and they came up with a beautiful model. I went, oh, that's it. That's what I want.
So the beauty, the aesthetic beauty of it is one thing, but I think for me was more the beauty of the content of it. So I was wondering whether or not, because to me it looks like the findings of some modeling work. So just out of curiosity, how did you go about developing that leadership tree?
Okay. Well, I'll be very honest, despite the fact I'm a researcher, it wasn't that. When COVID came, and for a long time, I've been going around in my mind thinking, there's something here in terms of leadership and how I want to communicate what leadership is for me. And so I use my experience as a management academic, so that fed into it. Also, as an introverted leader, I brought my own experience into it. But I'd coached quite a number of people by this time, sort of existing leaders, aspiring leaders, and particularly reluctant leaders, where a lot of this information came from.
Love it. I'm just going to pause the thing.
Yeah.
So say that again. What are all your different? So you got introverted leader.
Well, so
What are all
I
your
was
different?
an introverted
Yeah.
leader, and but the model still applies to an extrovert. But it's just used. Look, at the thing is, if you speak to most people about leadership, they think charisma is what leadership's about. And it's not, because charisma can cover a multitude of inadequacy. And on my tree, okay, there's personality there, but that doesn't mean charisma. So, and I remember someone who used to work for me when I was a director, and when I was leaving, and she said, "It's been great working for you. You've been a good role model for me as an introverted person, that I too can be a leader." So it sort of came from that to then bringing in the experience of the people I coach. And, as I said, so there's people who are experienced already and want to go a bit further. There's people who are aspiring, or maybe like NIHR fellowship, and they're just on that journey. And quite a few people who've got that are also very reluctant as well, because they've seen what other leaders are like, and I don't like it. And so the model for me was just to give them access to see, actually, you don't have to be like anyone else. My corny line is, you have to be yourself because all other positions are taken. So, so
I love it. You have to be yourself because all other positions are taken. Man, that is bad news for me.
It's not, it's great news. So and the model really came about from bringing all that experience together and then thinking about, my hypothesis was really that if you're looking at the model now, you'll see there's a trunk of authenticity, and that has roots, and they come from various factors, which so I've lost myself for a second. Let's go back to the trunk of authenticity. And my hypothesis was that if that isn't strong, in that perhaps you're being inauthentic, then the qualities, the branches of the qualities above can't be strong either. Or maybe you'll have one strong branch, like maybe perhaps passion is really strong for you, but everything else is pretty rubbish. I'm thinking of a particular ex-political leader who comes to mind from the UK. I'm sure other people, I can't think of their name right now. I'm sure other people might. So that was the driver behind it. But then I started thinking, well, what is authenticity? And this one I did do quite a lot of reading around it. I remember reading a psychology article, and they just said, so well, authenticity is no one really knows what it is, but we know what it is when we see it. So I thought, well, that's not particularly helpful. So
How does that help?
So I had a chat with a few of my clients and a few friends and other people, and I came up with those roots of authenticity, in our background, passions, virtues. And we choose, because their roots are beneath the soil, and we choose how much of that we bring to the authentic self. But ultimately, I always think it's the values piece that sits underneath it. If you're not living your values, then that's going to be quite painful for you. So that's really where we come from. So the Gary talking to you now is this authentic me, the one with my partner is this, the one with my mum is this, but it's all built on the same roots. As long as it's built on the roots and hasn't diverted from that, then it's going to be okay. So that's the sort of premise of it. And then, there's all the qualities at the top with the 5 branches of, guess what? Clarity is there, integrity, emotional intelligence, passion, and knowledge. And it's not a definitive model. I was doing a course about 4 years ago, and there's an academic, most of them are academics, but this academic said, well, where's the validity of this? I said, there isn't any. He said, it's a starting point for a conversation. Said, there's no right or wrong to it. Anyway, they went off and did a breakout room, and they came back and goes, I love it. It's all the vocabulary. All the vocabulary is there. I know how to describe and talk about stuff. So, and always people say, oh, you could add this in or that. And I said, great, add that onto your tree. That would be wonderful. So,
but I think that's, to me, like, I love hearing the stories behind how people go about developing the things that we use or are models for things, because sometimes they're these, eureka moments, and quite literally you got out of the bath back in ancient Greece and you discovered that the levels went up and down and therefore volume was invented, straight through to really detailed, developed work of validating and bringing stuff together. And although you claim this leadership isn't proper research, me and my research ears were hearing you collected data, you verified it with other sources, you've drawn it together, you've now tested it with other people, and you're allowing them to refine it. So,
I'm going to cut this clip out of the video and put that on my website.
Go for it. Like, well, I think so the reason I bring that up is I think one of the reasons why I am so passionate about having conversations with people around why they do research and the tools and the tips that they use in order to become successful in research is because, especially pre-COVID, COVID kind of cleared a few things up, but research is almost this dirty word in the public. And even you came across it in presenting a thing you created, and people then make assumptions about it, being like, oh, but it's not validated, or it's not this, or it's not cool, or it's not whatever. And I just think, are we overcomplicating it in order to make ourselves sound cooler?
Yeah, maybe you're right. I suppose it depends ultimately, for me, who your audience is. And that's, I was thinking about, I was watching Joseph's recording with you.
Yeah, Joseph
about
Manning's,
his NICE model.
Yes.
And and I thought, it's like, the patients, what do the patients need? So what does the audience need? And so sometimes, when I'm delivering leadership courses, I do have things well referenced because it's out there. But other times there hasn't been anything that I found that is useful enough, because it's too academic. And sometimes when you're doing leadership course, you think this is about tools for being a leader. It's not about understanding the roots of the great leader theory going back to 1800 and something. There's no need for that. Because actually, it's all about men, so we don't want that anyway. So,
and I agree, and I think, well, that's why I think too. I've appreciated you coming on and, like, I'll be selfish here, for me anyway, really helping to clarify what coaching and good coaching could look like, because despite lots of other people telling me, oh, you should, or blah blah blah, I've been really reluctant to, because for me, I've not come across that, either that right person or that right experience. And or maybe I'm just too stubborn, and I'm like, I just keep battling away on my own. I don't know what the reason is, but hearing more from somebody who is a professional coach on not necessarily like the power of it, or like talks I've been to, like coaching training sessions, they're like, oh, it'll make your workload easier and all this other stuff. And I'm like, not sure I'm a believer, but anyway, we'll put that on a shelf. Is how you described it and how you talked about it, I'm now able to see that it could become a really powerful tool that I could use as a postdoc researcher in helping to grow my career, grow how I think, and to improve the way I interact with other people. And I don't think I would have had that without this conversation. And I think that's why having these open, easy conversations that people can understand, and like, I have no doubt that in the bits that I've read on your website and in listening to you, like, I know you've done your homework. I know you have your own authenticity about you. And so that, to me, it's like I said before, it gives it that gravitas, but it's also made it digestible to me in a way that I can understand. And I really liked that about your leadership tree, is it's like, it's not a magical cure. It's a way of thinking about who you are, how to be more true to yourself, and what then are the qualities that you'll build into your own unique leadership style. So it's really cool.
Well,
Really
thank
like
you.
it.
Yeah. I mean, and with some clients I use it and other clients I don't. It just depends what they need. It's not my sole model. It's interesting what you're saying just then about you're helping with, sort of with your career path and so forth. The thing that was struck me is I always say to people, coaching can help you be the best version of yourself that you want to be, not
Mm.
what somebody else wants to be. Because I always love asking the question, say, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? And people normally give me an answer that they would give in an interview or something. Say, no, no, are you sure that's where you want to be? Because if you're happy where you are, that's fine. Let's just work on understanding it. Who's telling you where you need to? So yeah, it's those sorts of explorations that can be really valuable to people.
Very much so.
What does success look like on your own terms, not on anyone else's?
And I really do think that there's a big drive of that in the world of research, because there's always the pressure to be bigger, be better, be smarter, pull in bigger ref, pull in bigger grants. And sometimes actually there's nothing wrong with the security of just cracking on, doing your thing. And like, I listen to some of the people who are in more senior leadership positions within the academic world, and they can't remember the last time they actually really got to do research. And I'm like,
Yeah, lots of people. I coach senior people as well, and you see the sparkle has gone for them. And you
yeah,
explored and said, so why are you not going back just to being a professor and leaving the PVC position? Oh, I hadn't thought I could do that. Well, you can, it's again going back to what is your passion? What
yeah,
drives you? For some people, they love the management and the leadership and the taking the organization in the right direction. And I support them in that. But for others,
mm,
sometimes, a client, perhaps human resources will say, we didn't want them to leave their role. I said, do you want someone who's not happy being in that role? They're better off
oopsie.
adding value to the world by doing what they're passionate about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that's such an important message for people to hear. Um, in your, so the biggest thing I'm getting about you and your style of coaching that I quite like, which is gonna make this next question even trickier, is I didn't understand at the beginning when you said you're an emerging coach, because I was like, because to me, emerging means like at the beginning or career, and I know that's not
No,
where you are, but
yeah.
now I get what you mean in that you match and try and meet that client, that individual, where they're at to come up with a plan together. And I love that approach, because that's the style of research I really like as well, as research that's really grounded in what the patients need or what the clinician group needs, so that together the solution that the research study comes up with means everybody has a better experience.
Yeah.
In whatever shape or format that looks like, and hopefully then bigger consequences as well. So putting that a little bit on a shelf, because the next question you're not going to be able to match with the audience is for people who, so in my audience, I have mainly people who fall into three different categories. Again, sort of like I created these in my head. People who are research curious, so they've been hearing a lot about research in the news, or they've been to school and had one class on it or something. People who are um, so research curious, research engaged. So they might be doing something with it, but they're not yet leading their own independent work of research. And then research leaders. So people who are either doing a PhD, have finished a PhD, postdoc work, senior investigators, so on and so forth. So as a generic group, why should a researcher, whether they're a clinical academic or just a health researcher, find a way to invest in getting coaching?
Well, I guess the answer to that is it's interesting. So there's a nice definition of coaching, actually, which I probably think answers the question. And coaching is about, it supports people to develop and enhance their sort of professional, their personal, and their relational potential. And it helps them to take their rightful place in the relationship they have with themselves and others and the environment. So it just makes you, it goes back to that, it makes you the best version of yourself that you want to be. But primarily, I suppose, underpinning that, I had to sort of say it enables you to move forward with confidence built on authenticity. I think that's really the crux of it. So many people come to me and it's confidence that's the first thing that sort of comes up. And we look at inner critic and imposter syndrome, and and then we look at clarifying purpose, and I bring in some people call these core strengths, but in a coaching session I call them superpowers because it's far more exciting, and you can have a t-shirt with them written on. So we look at like what are your 5 or 6 superpowers that make you unique, to help people to realize that they just have to be them. They don't have to be all these other things, and you play to your strengths is a great expression. So it's helping people to find their, I often think about confidence as like the build or the foundation stones of confidence. So you've got those things I've just talked about, but then the sort of cement that holds them together is things like creating some time to think and plan, to take time to reflect and to be proud in what you're achieving, and and also going back to that purpose. Having the purpose is wonderful because you just say, is this decision I'm going to make going to help me achieve my purpose? No, right, well, I'm not going to do it then. Yes, I will. Or no, it doesn't, but it's my duty. I have to do it. Okay, well, I'll do it then. But no, there's so many no's though in it that loads of people, particularly in early career as a researcher or whatever they're doing, think they have to do everything, and you don't.
Wow, that is powerful. I absolutely loved that. I'm gonna have to like soundbite that and play that over and over and over because you packed so much into that to really digest it. So leading on from that, possibly my last question, but maybe not. I'm just got one eye on the clock.
That's okay.
Is you mentioned in that in your experience, a lot of these researchers and people who are stepping into on the cusp of a leadership position really struggle with confidence, and you go through things like imposter syndrome. Do you think then that imposter syndrome is something that can be overcome, or is it like a safety gauge that is again a useful tool so that you're not becoming one of those, well, I'm going to name and shame him because if he doesn't know this then he's really got issues, becoming a Trump? Because personally I never want to become a Trump, but I also don't want my, whether it's confidence, whether it's that imposter syndrome, combination of the two, holding me back. So where's the
Okay,
is
well,
coaching the key to navigating that?
I've helped a lot of clients to navigate it. So how I say, one of my clients, this is a few years ago now, which she said, I just want to tell my imposter syndrome to off. Like, no, it's part of you. It's part of you. It's doing a job. It's trying to keep you safe. It's trying so you don't make a fool of yourself, don't make an idiot of yourself. I said the only thing you can do with imposter syndrome is embrace it. And the secret to doing that, I'll give you and your listeners a little secret. There's
Okay.
more to it. There's more to it than this, but my favorite sort of metaphor is it's a bit like a dog. Anyone who's had a dog, and if you haven't, you've seen it on television, when the doorbell goes, a dog barks because what the dog hears is danger. There's someone trying to get in the house. And this is your imposter syndrome going, danger, you're about to make a fool of yourself. And so with a dog, what you do is you don't shout at the dog, going, you shut up, it's only the doorbell, because the dog hears you shouting and it says, oh my God, it must be really dangerous. I must let everyone else know that there's a problem. So it barks louder. What you're meant to do is to give the dog a treat and say, thank you for letting me know someone's at the door. I'll go and answer it. And so you train the dog like that. And it's the same with your imposter syndrome. You thank it. You say, thank you for letting me know that this situation might be a tricky one. But you know what? I prepared for this today, so I'm okay. Now, it sounds a bit bonkers, but one client messaged me after they had a very senior meeting and they said it worked. Said I sat in the meeting and I could feel the eye of Sauron coming round the table, coming to me. And I just said, I've got this. Gary's told me it's okay. He said, thank you for letting me know, but I've got this. And he said it quietened down enough for me to be able to do a good job. What happens is when you row with it, you're fighting with that in your head while you're trying to do a good job. So there you go. So it just quietens it down enough. And the more you say thank you, the more quiet it gets. It's reassured.
I really like that metaphor. So I've been just independently, like nobody told me this. I've been independently dealing with mine and I talked about it in a podcast with Zoe Zahner, caging my monster. So I don't refer to it as an imposter syndrome. I refer to it as an imposter monster.
Oh, poor little thing. You cage it up. It just wants to be stroked and told that everything's okay.
But like, so let me work with you here on this. Is for me, I don't necessarily see a monster as a bad thing. So, I read a lot of sci-fi fiction, and a monster is basically just a creature who's not well understood in my mind, in my definition. But monsters are often also untamed. And so there are times where, for everybody's safety, you do need to put them in a cage.
Yeah, that's fair
But
enough.
I love, and like for me, when I am well aware that I'm prepared, I'm ready, and my imposter monster is going, no, 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 this is gonna suck, da, da, da. I put it in the cage. But I love your analogy much better because I think exactly that. Like, it's about being kind and being kind to yourself and being kind to that part of yourself and reflecting and realizing that I'm going to change it from monster to creature. Try
Yeah.
and be a
Well,
little bit
you
gentler.
could even think about, rather than caging it, you can crate train the dog. You put it in a crate for its own safety, and you
Well,
said
so
it's
what I
all
was going to
right.
say is even more than that is instead of putting it in a cage, just putting it on a lead or giving it like so. I read the chimp paradox.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really liked that as well. Give your monkey, give your creature a treat to play with, and then you leave it in the corner playing with the treat because it's quite happy with itself, and then you can all go on and do what you want to do. And I saw similarities in that, and
Yeah.
I think I just need to shift my little metaphor a
Yeah.
little bit to be a bit kinder to myself and not look at because again, I never thought of that how you said it and like the look on your face when you said it was so powerful to me is it is part of you. So why would you yell at yourself? Why would you be mean to yourself?
Yeah.
Thank that bit of you, recognize that bit of you, and the more you do that, the more that you'll help.
Yeah. And I think literally, I said, I said, can't say, just say thank you for
Yeah.
letting me know, but say that, said not out loud because people think you've lost it. So, but in your head, say thank you for letting me know.
But People already know I'm mad, so it's fine. They're used to it.
She's just chatting to herself again. It's not
Exactly.
me, it's my imposter syndrome I'm talking
Exactly.
about.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that secret with everybody. I really, really appreciate your generosity in doing that.
You're welcome.
I think with that, unless you have any other little parting words of wisdom, I think we better wrap it up because we're getting close to about an hour of recording. It's flown by. Yeah, any other last things
Um,
or
well, I think the only things I mentioned them just now, but I think the two key things I always invite clients to do is to create some space in their diary. I call it strategic thinking time or planning time or reflection time, whatever you want to call it, where you just have, I always say to people, put 3 1-hour blocks in your diary in a week. And they go, I can't do that. So, well, but what will happen is the first one may get stolen, because an emergency crops up, but you
yeah.
created a buffer that wasn't there. So now you've got an hour you can deal with the emergency rather than working an hour later or postponing something. So then the second two become more sacrosanct. I've got a client who's senior and got a PA, and she knows the rules. The first one, maybe. The second one, no. And the third one, definitely not. So, every week he has at least 1 hour of strategic thinking time in work time, not driving home or at the weekend and stuff like that. So that's the one thing, create that space. You need the space to be objective. And the second one is, I think we work so hard and we're so driven, and quite a few people are coaching. Oh, yeah, well, I got my paper published, and I say, oh, what did you do to celebrate? Nothing. So you like tea and cakes? Go out for tea and cake. Celebrate. Mark the moment. I always invite clients, say once a week or once a month in your diary, just put proud time or pride time, whatever you want to call it, and just have 5 minutes or 10 minutes where you just keep a journal and just write some 3 things down that you're proud of that you've achieved. Not that you've done, but you're proud of. So it could be a small interaction with someone. It could be, I'm proud I finished the paper, or whatever it is. The reason for that, and I've noticed this with quite a few clients, is if you write down what I've done this week, it goes in here. And you write down what I'm proud of it goes in here. And that builds confidence. And so many clients are noticing a difference. So that's my final sort of offering, those 2 things.
Wow. Oh, I do not want to end this. I can see why you come so highly recommended now.
Oh, thank
Definitely.
you.
For everybody out there who is listening, who's enjoyed this, do make sure you check out the description, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube. I will link how you can get a hold of Gary in there, his website, other resources as well. So check those out if you found him interesting or you're thinking, I need me a little bit of coaching. Definitely check him out. And then finally, I just want to say again, Gary, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your advice, sharing your experience. I found it really, really, really interesting and personally quite helpful and valuable as well. So I cannot say thank you enough for joining me today.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity to do this. I've really enjoyed just engaging with you, and I hope your audience get some insight as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for everybody else out there, we will be putting the next episode up in another 3 weeks. So stay tuned. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Don't go away. Up next, we have the top 3 takeaways from this week's podcast by Dr. Rosalind Austin. I'm not sure if that was an episode or whether I just got like the best coaching session of my life. I'm not sure. What do you think? He was brilliant. I'm so grateful that he was willing to come on and give us his time and share his experience with us. And what a cool coincidence that, okay, it wasn't health research, and the Researcher Revealed podcast is about health researchers. But, he had his own experience in academic research in consumer behavior. But, he reached a really high level in that and was doing refs and writing papers and all that sort of stuff. And I think that previous experience has, for me anyway, really gave a lot more weight to a lot of the stuff that he said in the episode. And speaking of the episode, I'm definitely going to be listening to this one more than once because he really packed a lot of value in it, for me anyway. I hope you found it valuable too. So what are my top 3 takeaways? First and foremost is the power of a network. Despite his experience in research, he kind of put that to one side and he really wanted to focus on coaching. And by doing that, he kind of put all that behind. And then through a friend of a friend, somebody connected him up with a person who was applying for an NIHR senior fellowship. And now he's got this whole really unique specialized niche in coaching clinical academics. So I think it's really powerful to remember that your networks and who you know can possibly add some new opportunities, some areas where you might be able to specialize within your career. Top takeaway number 2. For me, it was the amount of similarities I heard between coaching and research. He talked about so often how he uses the power of curiosity to drive and to encourage an individual to problem solve. And that's what research is all about. It's about curiosity, driving questions, coming up with data, and coming up with a solution to go forward. And so I thought that was, for me anyway, it was a really unexpected observation of how similar coaching could be for research. And therefore, for me, it really helped me see the power of coaching as an emerging researcher to help guide my own pathway, because it's literally the same thing. Well, for me anyway. I don't know. Tell me in the comments what you think. Do you think that coaching and research are similar? Or do you think that's just something that I saw in it? Let me know. Number three takeaway is the use of coaching to discover your pathway. And here I really, really liked that phrase that he used, the privilege of finding your purpose. And I think myself and loads of people that I've spoken to, we get really bogged down in what the challenges are around being a health researcher, and the fact that there isn't a good clinical academic pathway, and the fact that for some specialities there's additional challenges to wanting to have a clinical academic career. But that coaching can be a tool that you put in your toolbox that can help you learn to negotiate and navigate that pathway so that you find your passion. And maybe that's changed throughout the course of your PhD, or maybe it's stayed the same, and maybe it is about discovering the best way to achieve that passion, but that it can be a real tool to help you get to where you want to go. I loved that. Right. That's it for this week. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you feel that this is a great way to kick off season number 2. Should I get him back for a masterclass? Maybe a masterclass on leadership? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Not necessarily for me, but it just helps to tell YouTube and podcasting platforms that people are listening to this and that they're appreciating this content, which then will drive it up higher up the algorithm, which means other people who will be able to discover it. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and thanks for all the comments, the reviews, and the likes. I really appreciate it. And welcome to season 2. I'll see you again in 3 weeks. Thank you. Bye.